Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, a new report about those worn-out tubes at San Ysidro. It claims the plant has more problems than anywhere else in the nation.
Tonight on the Roundtable, we reveal a few surprises about San Diego's 9-month-old prison realignment program and new plans to beef up security at the San Ysidro border crossing raises some health concerns.
And the lines are already forming for the 25th annual Stand Down in San Diego, a national program to assist homeless veterans. KPBS Evening Edition starts now. Hello, good evening. Thanks for joining us. I'm Dwayne Brown. A new report says San Onofre's steam generators had more tube problems than any nuclear plant in the U.S. San Onofre has been shut down since January because of excessive wear in tubes carrying radioactive water. A report from the environmental group Friends of the Earth says San Onofre has had more tubes repaired than all of the nation's nuclear plants combined. The report is based in part on a leaked memo from the plant's operator, Southern California Edison. The utility hasn't commented. The Justice Department isn't confirming reports a federal grand jury is looking into a taser death at the border, but the man who took the cell phone video says he was questioned about it by a grand jury. He says it shows Anastasio Hernandez Rojas in May 2010 surrounded by customs agents pleading for help. He died after being tasered multiple times. His family wants the case resolved.
These 2 years have been very difficult for my family, for my children, because they ask me questions. I think they have a right to know. I hope the case is resolved and there's justice so I can give my children answers and tell them where these people are who did this to their daddy.
The Border Patrol says tasers were used because Rojas was combative. The county medical examiner says he died of a heart attack, with a heart condition and methamphetamine use as contributing factors. A U.S. congressional report questions Mexico's decisions in its drug crackdown. The Senate Foreign Relations Committee says reliance on the Mexican military isn't working. Drug violence is continuing and human rights violations are increasing. It says Congress should approve $250 million a year for judicial reforms in Mexico and an overhaul of its state police. An apparent drug tunnel has been found in Tijuana. The unfinished tunnel starts in a warehouse but doesn't make it across the border into San Diego. It is the second border tunnel discovered this week. The other one was found in Yuma. The rope at the children's pool in La Jolla isn't going back up yet, even though the State Coastal Commission approved it. Now the Planning Commission has to consider a permit for a year-round barrier. That's expected to happen before the end of the year. ComicCon officially kicked off this morning. KPBS arts reporter Beth Accomando was down at the San Diego Convention Center for the first day of the pop culture celebration.
I'm here at ComicCon International with 5 quick tips on how to enjoy the show. First, express yourself. Wear a t-shirt from your favorite show or dress like your favorite character.
It's kind of hard sometimes to find costumes for 30-somethings. I think that both of us are a little bit beyond like the schoolgirl, schoolboy phase. So, finding some semi-adult characters, and she gets a really cool dress and I get a really cool coat.
Second, make a plan. Check the schedule, mark what you want to see, and then know the lay of the land.
Pretty much on Tuesday night, I went through the entire schedule for the entire 4 days because I have a 4-day pass. And my friend and I just picked out every single panel that we want to go to, and we're going to try to make it work. But a lot of times it's hard because of the long waiting lines like you see that I'm in right now. So a lot of times you see panels that you want to go to, but you're like, oh, but I know the line's going to be long for that one. So you have to decide what can you miss out on and which ones do you really have to see to make your Comic-Con experience worth it.
Number 3, have the right attitude about lines and crowds. So how long have you been in line?
We've been in line since yesterday afternoon. They just are something you have to deal with, so it's like, you come into it, you expect the line, and you know it's going to be that way, and so the best thing to do is just be as prepared as you can be, have other things you need, make sure you have plenty of snacks, some Red Bull, you're good to go.
Number 4, if the crowds do bother you, remember there's plenty to do outside. Holy Batmobile!
Every single Batmobile that's been made from TV and the movies is here right now.
And finally, come into the convention hall, stop by Artist Alley and Small Press, and buy something from an artist like Chet Phillips.
Yes, I'm offering the Simeon playing card set, Monkopolis, which is a limited edition book, and we also have laser engraved badges from some of the characters from Monkopolis.
KPBS arts reporter Beth Accomando at ComicCon International. You can follow her coverage at Cinema Junkie on kpbs.org and on Twitter at Cinebeth. Junior Seau's family has donated some of his brain tissue for research. There are questions about whether damage from his football career contributed to his decision to commit suicide 2 months ago. The tissue is being sent to the National Institutes of Health. Realignment is cutting the state prison population as promised, but now county jails are reaching capacity and probation officers face a heavier workload than predicted. Peggy Pico is looking into that issue at the roundtable.
Last October, prison realignment went into effect in San Diego County. The law aimed to ease overcrowding in state prisons by sending nonviolent criminals to county jails. It also meant that when offenders were released from custody, county probation officers would take over supervision from the state. Now, 9 months into the program, probation is supervising more people than the state projected, and county jails are at 92% capacity. Here are some of the numbers. As of June 29th, more than 1,700 post-release offenders are now being supervised by the San Diego County Department of Probation. Nearly 800 have been arrested for probation violations for committing a new crime, and almost 1,300 have been sentenced to San Diego County Jail. Joining me now with an update on the realignment are San Diego County District Attorney Bonnie DeManis and Mac Jenkins, Chief of Probation for the county. Thank you both for being here today.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, Bonnie, my first question is for you. There were 6 low-level offenders that were recently arrested on murder-related charges. That doesn't sound nonviolent. Does that surprise you?
Well, that is the problem that we've all been worried about. What nonviolent means is by statute. And so you can have people that have violence in their past or gun use or possession, and career criminals that are just in the last thing that they were sentenced on was a nonviolent crime. So no, it doesn't surprise me, but I think that it's too early to make any broad brushed conclusions from that, but it's cause for concern.
It caused from concern, and it was 6. We're talking about 6 out of all
1 murder, 5 attempted murders. But yes, it is cause for concern.
Mm-hmm. And Chief Jenkins, do you think that these arrests indicate a problem with the supervision that's going on, or do you see it as a bigger problem?
I don't think it reflects necessarily a problem with the supervision that's going on, because as Bonnie said, it doesn't necessarily surprise us. We've worked with offenders coming back into the community for, frankly, both of our careers, and we know that sometimes those people do bad things. In fact, of the individuals that were arrested there, one of them actually was reporting pretty regularly to his probation officer, had engaged in some of the programs, but still made a decision to do a violent crime. So I don't think that that reflects that the supervision was lacking, but it reflects that that individual made a decision not to take advantage of an opportunity to change his life. And that's something that we're always concerned about, because we're trying to focus on holding those individuals accountable and putting them into services so that they can take advantage to do something different.
Some of these prisoners you're talking about to take advantage of what's been out there, some of them are career prisoners. Now, we heard nonviolent. We talked about that. My understanding is some sex offenders, some people dealing with explosives, one person who had a serious injury offense to a police officer. They could go to
involuntary manslaughter, drug sales, car thieves, you know, that do a ring of car thieves,
right,
possession of guns. I mean,
how is this not considered a violent crime in context of this realignment
because
program?
It's not as you and I know it from a lay perspective. It's just by statute, and that's what they've used. And we being the district attorneys, didn't have input into that process. Really, we were sold the concept. And that concept hasn't come to bear. Like 3 years would be the max locally, the maximum. It's not 3 years. We have somebody in there for 10 years and 5 months. And the jails were not meant to be prisons.
Yeah, they were meant to be detention centers for
That's right.
up to a year, right?
Up to a
typically
year. That's right.
in the past
Exactly.
have been. Well, Mac, now according to a letter updating the county supervisors, San Diego is monitoring more of these post-prison transfer to jail offenders than before. What kind of impact does that have on your office?
It has a significant impact. One, because the percentage is higher than had been projected at this time, and also because we haven't hired the number of probation officers that we wanted to have at this particular time, so it's been a huge workload on our probation officers. So what we've done in response to that is we've increased our linkages with local law enforcement. Sheriff Gore and I started some time ago, well before realignment, a program we call Tracking Known Offenders, where the probation department shares information with the sheriff to engage street sheriff deputies to assist probation officers in providing supervision on individuals in the community. So we're pushing that program to expand it throughout all of the sheriff's jurisdictions, and also working closely with the police chiefs in the county. And
I was just going to say that it wasn't well thought out, so nobody was really ready for it, which is why MAC is trying to catch up with hiring people. Our office has an overload as well. The sheriff's department, like you mentioned earlier, is almost, full.
Yeah, and I've heard you say before you're making lemonade out of lemon here. Out of some lemons here. I had one quick question. We don't have a whole lot of time. Talk a little bit to me about just basic issue of recidivism in prisoners who are released either to probation officers or to supervision.
Well, what we've seen so far in the letter that we gave to the board, we've reported 799 arrests, almost 800, but more than 500 of those are what we call flash incarceration. So we've seen about 216 revocation proceedings. And so when you ask about recidivism rate, what we're looking, as Bonnie says, it's too early to really talk in definitive terms of recidivism rate. But what we do know is that just about 10% of the individuals that have been under supervision have undergone a revocation proceeding. And this is really important because we look to revoke someone because they've either committed a new crime or they've repeatedly failed on their terms of supervision. So when we're trying to revoke them, we're trying to remove them from the community and put them back in incarceration for an extended period of time. It's early, but right now that revocation rate is relatively low.
And the tools they have now, best practices. And we know from our program of reentry that we all participated in what is necessary, because it can work. We want it to work. But we are trying to, paddle upstream right now.
You're paddling upstream. There's lots of new programs. You were funded with a $10 million project over 5 years. Well, let's talk about money. Let's talk about, actually, let's talk about, $10 million. You saved $10 million over 5 years. That's what I was like, wait a minute, that's not quite right. But what I wanted to ask about that, basically, you saved that money, but there is no funding for any just designated funding for these programs to go on.
Well, they've given us money for it based on a formula, but there's nothing guaranteed. They could tomorrow say, we're not going to give you this money. And county, this is your problem right now. And that's what we're worried about. And we're trying to make sure that we have enough to do what we need to do. The treatment dollars, the probation, the sheriff, the DA, we have extra staff that we're going to have to hire.
So of the dollars that have been made available by the state, we can tell you 44% is going to Sheriff Gore for his needs, 24% has come to the probation department to build what we call a post-release division, and 26% we're putting towards treatment and intervention services to try and reduce the recidivism rate.
So it's been designated already. I'm sure
for this year.
For this year, right?
Yes.
Nothing guaranteed for the future. Well, we're going to have to leave it there because we're out of time. So thank you both so much for talking with me.
It's been a pleasure.
Very much.
People have been camped out for days at another annual event in downtown San Diego, the 25th National Stand Down Program for Homeless Veterans.
He's giving an interview.
Like a sentry, this dog is guarding the gate and its family's sole possession. Some of these folks have been waiting for the past 3 days for a chance to reconnect with the military community.
Protect them, surround them with your angels.
And get off the streets for a few days.
Under his wings shall you trust.
Young church members prayed and talked.
I mean, we're not going to change what I believe, so we're not going to basically move on what you guys have to say.
Stand Down doesn't begin until 0600 Friday morning, but people are already reaching out to those in need, including John Donner, a Marine veteran.
And there's definitely the sense that we need to help our veterans, especially the ones that are coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan. We don't want to repeat the mistakes that we made for the Vietnam veterans.
The founders of Stand Down say it means you don't leave any comrades behind the wire. If they're wounded, you go get them, regardless of the cost. Veterans Village of San Diego says it cost $25 million to put on this 3-day event. When it started 25 years ago, 200 people showed up. And last year, the number was more than 1,000. This intervention by vets for vets gives them a peace of mind, much like a military base, says Army veteran Carmine Sperduto.
They help with dental, glasses, everything, anything they need here.
Sperduto has been struggling with homelessness off and on for the past 4 years in San Diego. He's been waiting in line here since Tuesday.
We fought for this country. Why are we on the streets? I don't understand this. I don't. I mean, I don't know. They give us money, pensions and so forth. Vietnam era and Iraq time, they get pension money and so forth like this. You're looking at $940 a month. How far can that go?
Stand Down provides full medical, dental, and eye care services, along with grooming, legal advice, and housing assistance. More than 700 people have pre-registered for Stand Down, and hundreds more are expected to show up. San Diegans are boarding buses at record numbers. Transit officials say MTS set a new record for ridership. 55.5 million riders over the 12-month period ending June 30th. That's 800,000 more than the previous record set in 2009.
Every day, about 200,000 people cross through the San Ysidro port of entry. Sometimes they wait as long as 3 hours to get into the U.S. Now the federal government plans to build booths to inspect cars before they head into Mexico, raising concerns of long lines on the U.S. side of the border. Joining me to talk about the issue and the potential environmental impact is Fronteras Desk reporter Adrian Florido and David Flores, an architect in San Ysidro. Thank you both so much for joining me here. Adrian, my first question is for you. Tell us the basic project. What is that going to look like? How many booths? What are we going to see?
Well, like you said, the port of entry at San Ysidro is very busy, the busiest in the world, the land port of entry. And so what the government is doing is undertaking a very large expansion project to try to move cars more efficiently, to cut those northbound wait times down from what is often 3 hours or more to 30 minutes tops, they hope, over the next several years. But one of the interesting things that they're also doing is...
So I'm just sorry to interrupt, I just want to clarify. So when you say northbound, they're trying to help ease the traffic problem coming from Mexico into the U.S.
Right.
by pre-screening or doing inspections on the north side, on our side of the border going into Mexico?
No, they're trying to do that by building more booths on the south side. Now, that's one part of the project. Another part of the project that is a couple of years away is that they're planning on building inspection booths for cars heading from the U.S. into Mexico. That currently doesn't exist. Currently, the Mexican government does inspect cars on a pretty sporadic basis. You're heading south, and now the U.S. is also building its own inspection booths so that U.S. officials can also inspect cars as they're leaving. Obviously, a big reason for this is the concern over drug the trafficking of money and guns into Mexico.
Right, weapons getting across from there. And this is where the crux of the matter comes in. And David, I want to ask you about this. This is the concern that those types of inspection booths on this side of the border could cause a lot longer lines.
Right.
So the environmental impact on that, you've done some research on that. Tell us what you've done and what you've found.
We have. So over a 2-year period, we received funding to do a 2-year study looking at several aspects, both kind of the social aspects of crossing, like border crossers, what are they experiencing as they cross through, as well as an environmental aspect, which looks at air quality and what populations are most affected by having to wait as a pedestrian, 2-3 hours to cross, or the community itself in San Ysidro. So we did the first ever air quality analysis community-wide for San Ysidro.
And you actually presented that to whom, and what was the response to that?
So we've presented, myself and Dr. Quintana from San Diego State presented to different bodies. One is presented to the General Services Administration as a, bringing out initial information about the results that we were identifying. We've presented to SANDAG, the local regional planning agency, and several other state air quality boards.
So obviously one of the big concerns here is that, if you've got cars waiting for 3 hours to get into the U.S., that's a lot of cars just idling, spewing exhaust.
Exactly.
And so what was interesting about David's research that they found was that the closer they took air quality samples from different points in San Ysidro, the neighborhood just north of the border in San Diego, and found that the closer you got to that long line of cars, obviously the worse the air quality. And so the big concern is that if southbound inspections are going to begin, that is, cars being inspected as they go into Mexico, that there might be a long line on the north side, and that might augment that pollution
kind of leak over onto our side.
And we've already started to see some of those impacts. Right now, sporadically, the Border Patrol will stop all vehicle traffic. And they have actually done inspections, stopping traffic in the middle of the lanes. And we've seen about 2.5 to 3 mile queuing lines already into the community of San Ysidro. So I-5 going north into the rest of San Diego, the stretch is maybe 4.5 miles before you exit or leave the community of San Ysidro. So it's almost outside of the community.
Well, let me do one thing. I have to talk about Chris Maston, the U.S. Customs and Border Protection. His response to this was basically, he sent us, he talked to you, Adrian, and we got this statement. And here's what he had to say. Most of our energy is clearly focused on travelers and goods coming into the United States, but we do recognize that we have a responsibility to perform those outbound checks, and we're going to do that. He did not address the environmental impact. Right. That said, we only have about 30 seconds left. You're doing some things preemptively in the schools. You have some ideas on how to maybe preemptively, if this moves forward, to take care of it.
We do. So we see the most affected population as being children. Through other research, children under 8 are the most impacted with heavy toxins in the air because of their physical aspect. And so we're concerned for the school populations that are closest to the border. So working with the EPA and their school flag program to warn the community about heavy polluted days, we'll work in some kind of programming to make sure that that the schools have alternative programming to keep kids indoors and at least minimize the time that they spend outside.
So we'll certainly be following this,
yes.
Both your prevention and what's actually going to happen.
And in fairness to Customs and the GSA, they say this is still several years away. There's still design elements that aren't known, and so we don't really know what the impacts will be. And maybe we'll address them, when they come up, but we don't know yet.
And that could change. Technology could change. Right. Maybe there's more electric cars. We don't know.
Maybe.
David, Adrian, thank you both so much for being here.
Thank
you, Peggy.
U.S. Customs and Border Protection will be here to respond to the environmental impact concerns in just a moment. Wells Fargo has agreed to a multi-million-dollar settlement over accusations it violated fair lending laws. The bank was accused of discriminating against qualified African-American and Hispanic borrowers, steering them into subprime mortgages or charging higher fees. The settlement will cost Wells Fargo at least $175 million. More now on an auto inspection project at the border. As you've already heard, some folks are raising health concerns. Peggy is joined at the roundtable by the Director of Customs and Border Protection from San Ysidro.
Joining me now is Chris Maston, Director of Field Operations for U.S. Customs and Border Protection in San Diego, to respond to these issues. Chris, thank you so much for talking with us today. And I have to ask you, your agency, How are you responding to some of the concerns about air pollution and congestion at the San Ysidro port of entry?
Congestion at the port of entry at San Ysidro is a real issue, and CBP, my agency, takes it very seriously. That is why we've undertaken this massive port reconstruction project. The wait times have been extremely excessive on the inbound side. We recognize that. So facilitating or expediting legitimate trade and travel across our border while interdicting illicit goods crossing the border are not competing priorities. So we have to address both with equal energy.
And so phase one of this construction has already begun on which side of the border?
On the U.S. side.
U.S. side, you're getting one lane, correct?
Well, we're getting several lanes. We're basically expanding the footprint of the inbound port of entry at San Ysidro. Increasing inspection lanes to ultimately we're building the capacity that we need to process these 110,000 people a day that arrive at our ports.
That are coming across. And phase one, I meant, was the one lane. Phase one is done. When is the rest of the construction expected to be?
Well, phases 2 and 3 are in the out years and haven't been funded yet at all. So really uncertain on the timeline there.
What are you doing to address the community concerns? We talked a little bit about this, of the public safety versus there is real concern about the congestion and air pollution. What is your agency doing to address those?
Well, in conjunction with the General Services Administration, who is, this is their project, their construction project, we have held a number of community forums. We have regular meetings with our stakeholders in the community to make sure that we understand what the concerns are and that we integrate those concerns into our planning sessions internally as to what we build to ensure that we're building the right port of entry for that environment down there.
So there is some discussion going on. Director Matson, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And you can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thank you so much for joining us. You have a great night.